The ignorant are ignorant of their own ignorance, and the ignorance of the oppressed is the oppressor's greatest strength. Therefore, those who know must teach. African proverb. African Americans makes up just 13.5% of the U.S. population. However, 75% of those real crime story reenactment TV shows depict tragic crimes committed by African Americans. This is not because most violent crimes are committed by African Americans. Most violent crimes in the U.S. are in fact committed by Caucasians. The reason why crime shows so disproportionately depicts violent crimes committed by African Americans is because repeatedly showing us those tragic stories about our group makes us live in fear of each other and makes us think the worst of each other. It also divides us and shifts our collective aggressions away from our white society and redirects it towards ourselves. Keeping us within this condition prevents us from being able to unify against the white society. The white society's criminalization of African American culture is also used to manufacture societal consent for the mistreatment of African Americans. The success of the 1960s civil rights movement was greatly due to the national and global support that was attained by Dr. King's nonviolent strategies. Once those images of African Americans being brutalized with fire hoses, police batons, and canine dogs for merely peacefully seeking to be treated with the basic principle of human dignity were aired on, once it was aired upon America's nightly news, they gained national and global support for the plight of African Americans. The global response in support of African Americans were immense. Dr. King was even awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent efforts in pursuit for full equality for African Americans. African Americans were favorably perceived by millions of people around the world as being a dignified people pursuing an equality that we should have been born with. These global responses in support of African Americans totally embarrassed the U.S. government. It also eroded its global image and standing in the world. White oppressive forces realized then that they continued their subjugation of Black people as a means of maintaining their dominance. It had become necessary to manufacture societal consent to do so. They achieved this by creating media propaganda campaigns that portrays Black people as being a major problem of the white society. Those propaganda campaigns created a shifting of victimization in behalf of whites and against the interests of Black people, which lessened pressure for social change in behalf of Black people. It's a nefarious propaganda campaign known as manufactured consent to mistreat. The corporate media are tools used to serve and further the agendas and to serve the interests of the white ruling elites. The white ruling elites uses the media to portray African Americans as being a major problem of the U.S. society through lies and manufactured news reports. They make us appear as being a part of a treacherous, frightening, and insane fringe, thereby creating a false impression of wanton Black violence and criminality. This process is known as character assassination. This character assassination is intentionally designed to create increasingly prejudiced, distorted perceptions and incriminating beliefs about African Americans that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to our plight. It also lessens pressure for social change on our behalf. It also makes any serious criticism of white racism almost impossible. Most significantly, these fraudulent depiction creates a consensual national setting where the mistreatment of Black people now appears as being justified. This allows eventualities to unfold against Black people without opposition or resentment. Therefore, facilitates a consensual national setting that justifies Black mistreatment. When contempt of Black people is made to appear to be justifiable, it is the most fierce and most effective type of racist system because its witnesses, its bystanders, and even the world audience will sit by idly allowing the Black population to be brutally mistreated under the belief that it's all justified. This is very important for the U.S. criminal justice system, wherein which black people are disproportionately incarcerated, given stiffened sentencing, and are more likely than any other group to be brutally mistreated while in police care, or even killed while unarmed by police. This psychological warfare program allows white cops to routinely kill black people and get off by merely saying that they were afraid of losing their lives. These injustices now go mostly ignored because their perception has so constantly become that it's all now justified. Hitler used the same psychological warfare strategies against the Jews. Okay, this practice of media social engineering is very similar to the type of propaganda technique used by Hitler to facilitate his consensual mistreatment of the Jews, to facilitate the Holocaust of the Jews. Hitler's propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, portrayed the Jews as being a fearsome enemy of the German society through lies and manufactured news reports. These negative imageries were used to justify their annihilation. You remember, the Jews were white and they spoke German. So to turn their white German-speaking neighbors against them, they portrayed them as being everything that was wrong with the country. When prices was high, they said inflation's on the Jews. When things were going bad, it was always the Jews. And this allowed the Nazis to then come in and kill Jews and confiscate, because it's all now perceived to be justified. This is the tactic that's being used against black people now. Many of us don't know it. And the program is so effective that this is why when many people come to America, they come to America with negative preconceptions about African Americans. Even black people come here from the Caribbean and from Africa and looking down on African Americans. Now you have to remember, their preconception about African Americans was formulated by the propaganda they received. Their knowledge of African Americans was seen through the lens of the white society. And that's why they come here looking down on African Americans. This is why all different groups come here looking down on African Americans. Most don't know any of our great narratives. Most don't know that most inventions that revolutionized the world were invented by black people. And a great percentage of black people are African Americans. Most people don't know these facts. They only know the negative. Now, the white society denigrate, and this system is so effective that many black people have turned against their own people. There were times that it's recently changed a bit since George Floyd's death. There were a time when a white cop would kill a black person, and the other black person maybe deserved it. That's how effective this social engineering is. Notice that I don't just speak, I teach. Those who know the truth must teach. Our mindset, where we're hating ourselves, believing we're our worst enemies, was formulated through the white society's many propaganda campaigns. They're constantly deploying propaganda campaigns that manipulates our minds and manipulates perception of society in ways that serve to protect the system of white supremacy. Each one teach one, wake up and learn the truth.